Share in a few more, so that way everybody can know.
That's right.
You did your side. Okay. Let's do a group here. Love letters to Greece. Are you there? Let's see how many are gonna follow.
See, I don't even have a makeup person, so if my hair is doing something funny, this is what we expose ourselves to here when we do these live spontaneous webcasts. So just keep that in mind. Okay, are we good there?
Sure.
You've successfully shared. That's great. I have successfully shared as well.
I share in all the pages. The what is it? The Hellenic American Center of the Arts. Let's do that one too.
Okay. Thank you again
our friends
for your
in
patience.
Greece and the rest of Europe.
That's right.
If you're up at 5 in the morning.
Yeah, if you're really having a hard time sleeping, we're a great way to spend your night.
All right, we can do.
Ready to rock. Okay, now let's take a look at ourselves here. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, our Facebook webcast. Thank you for joining us. We have, before we get to the core of what we want to discuss today, we have some very pleasant news to share. This past Friday, the 27th of October, Vasily Despina and myself were invited to come to the Russian Youth Forum of New York for 2017. It was attended by a number of dignitaries, including the Russian ambassador, the new Russian ambassador, Anatoly Antonov. And we were allowed to deliver a presentation of Anna and Vladimir. And what happened?
Well, it was a crowd of over 200 people, I believe. It was full, a lot of youth. I was very nervous when I walked in with Despina. George had prepared a wonderful speech with a presentation that we worked together to explain what Anna and Vladimir is to our fellow Russians. So it was a presentation, a video promo, and George spoke in Russian, explaining why we're doing, why I started the project, why I wrote the rock opera, and being my Russian marketing director here, he explained why this is important for the Russians as well as the Greeks, and of course the greater American public and everybody else. And I think the minute you stepped up and I mentioned rock opera of Anna and Vladimir, everybody cracked a great applause. I mean,
that was really nice.
Out of another total of 8 contestants, I believe.
Yeah, there were 8 other projects that were presented, all very high quality projects, and it was very
9.
It was a very big honor to have been chosen as first place. And here is the you can show our viewers here what Anna and Vladimir had won. That's right.
It says 2017 Russian Youth Forum New York.
That's right.
First place winner.
And this was awarded to us by the
Contest Youth Project
Gorchkov Foundation, which is a Russian organization that supports diplomatic efforts. And we were very honored to have been honored by such an organization and to get such a lovely approval. And not only the award itself, but just the reception. How people responded to the idea of a rock opera of Vladimir of Kiev and Anna Porfiroganita, which is really very, very, very wonderful. People learned, they were reminded about Russian Hellenic ties, which is exactly what we're trying to talk about here. So
yeah, as we mentioned in the first couple of episodes, we go back over 1,000 years, and many people have forgotten this. And through Anna and Vladimir, we want to bring out the friendship and the love that came out between these two people, and why it's important to the modern world and everything that's happening now to remember them and remember our roots, where we came from. We're not that different.
That's right. That's right. And I wanted to also just remind everybody who's watching us that if you'd like to in any way participate in Anna and Vladimir in any way, if you'd like to offer your creative talent in some way, if you'd like to help spread the word, if you'd like to also contribute, there is a nonprofit organization that has been set up for contributions. So please, go to the website. We'll have a link for that. And,
we have the Porfirio Foundation link, and everything else goes under it. And of course, it's a nonprofit. And we'll mention the website later, porfirioband and rockopera.com. But we love to get involved with you guys too, and meet other creative individuals that can help us in our journey, and do some shows together.
Absolutely. And I've been to all 3 of the performances so far, and they're absolutely fantastic. So you definitely got to be at the next one. If you'll do nothing else, show up at the next one, and I promise you won't be sorry.
We're also UNESCO awarded.
Yes.
From Greece, the Club of Piraeus and Islands, President Mr. Ioannis Maronitis. So we're UNESCO award, and now we've been acknowledged from the Russian youth.
That's right, from the Gorchkov Foundation, and this is just the beginning. So we're looking forward to a lot more. So let's move on. We started our initial discussion. We talked about Hellenic civilization, and don't think that Billy's surfing the net right now. He's just helping spread the word about our webcasts as we're live on Facebook. And please, again, if you share, we really appreciate it. So we're going to talk. We started talking about Hellenic civilization, that is Greek civilization, all the way back from the ancient period, and then we, of course, focused our attention on the Second Rome, which is Constantinople, commonly known as Byzantium, and that is where the Russian civilization and the Hellenic civilizations met. Initially, it was a difficult meeting because there was competition, and then it became one of great cooperation, which which changed the path of not only those two civilizations, but of the entire world, for sure. So now we're going to jump forward a little bit more in history. So what happened was originally, just to recap, Anna Porphyrogenita, who was the sister of Basil II, the Byzantine emperor, married Vladimir the Great, Prince of Kiev. Russia becomes a Christian civilization, Orthodox Christian, and so that was in 988. And then 1054, there was a split between the Eastern and Western churches. But during this whole time, Russia and Byzantium have ties. Kiev and Rus and Byzantium are tied. And then there's the Mongol invasion that happens right in the 13th century, which was preceded by civil wars within Russia at the time. So that was what weakened the state, and Byzantium was also undergoing invasions as well at the time. But there was still free exchange between both civilizations. And then what's interesting is that this is kind of what I call, again, the checkered effect in our histories, where when one civilization is under siege by somebody and is under occupation, the other is liberated from that occupation. So after this period, we start noticing this little checkered pattern. So now what happens is that Russia was under the Mongol Tartar invasion for about 240 years.
Was it the Golden Horde?
The Golden Horde, yes. Correct. And then what happens is that Ivan III emerges as a Grand Prince of Moscow. At this point, Russian civilization has now started to become focused around Moscow, which is the new power center. And because, again, we had the Mongols, then there was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, all of these, which was Catholic, the Poles were Catholic. So this is where the Eastern and Western churches...
And this is a little trick question. Actually, it's an interesting fact. Lithuania, which is a tiny country now in the Baltic, was at that time period a giant country.
Yes.
I think it overtook what Poland is right now almost, right?
Yes, absolutely. Ukraine, yeah. Absolutely. And that actually ended up causing a lot of issues that had effects throughout all of history, even to this very day. So what happened was that Ivan III emerged as a leader in a very difficult time, and at that same time, what happened in Constantinople was gradually surrounded more and more by the Ottoman Turks. So let's just talk a little bit about that.
By 1453. Constantinople falls. The last emperor, Constantine Paleologos XI, from the Morea, the Peloponnese, he falls to death. He defending the city, knowing that fully well he was not gonna escape. He didn't want to. He wanted to actually die fighting with the remaining Greeks and other Italians that were around, Genoese, Venetians, whoever stayed to defend the walls from hundreds of thousands of population that Constantinople had. By that time, there were probably about 9,000 people that were able to defend the walls. Not the population, but it had shrunk so much. So many people had left. There was poor from the wars, from the Turkish invasion, and it took like a year. It took a long time for them to penetrate the walls, but eventually the walls were breached. And I believe, much like there's a rumor, just like with Leonidas in the 300, who was an ancestor of Paleologos. He was from the Peloponnese as well, in Sparta. He died fighting to the end, and Ephialtes had opened the back door, let the Persians in from Thermopylae. They say also that happened in the walls too. Somebody left a door open, and the Turks were able to come in.
Oh God.
But it was eminent that the empire was going to fall.
It was kind of a slow strangulation, basically, over time.
It was the Cretan archers actually that came from Crete. They were the most famous archers of the ancient world, all the way up to the medieval world. They actually killed so many Turks that Mehmed, they had occupied 3 towers and killed so many of the Turks that Mehmed begged them to stop after they actually had overcame Paleologos and won. They just told them, "We're gonna let you go." They just actually let them go into the ships, and they went back to Crete. But Paleologos' 2 brothers, one of them was Thomas from the Peloponnese, who was Sophia's father, did not make it in time to support with additional ships Constantinople, and also Theodore was another brother because they were coming from Peloponnese and they had bad weather. Mm-hmm. It might have postponed the invasion by another month, perhaps, mm-hmm. but that's where this happens. Sophia, of course, what we're talking about today. Sophia, I'm sorry. Sophia, yeah, her name was Zoe.
Zoe Sophia, yes, we'll get to that
Sophia. As well. She was able to escape with her family and her brothers, and her father Thomas was the brother of Constantine Paleologos the 11th. So. We'll continue with that. Yeah.
So, actually, another thing to also pay attention to is the fact that Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire, was greatly weakened also by the Fourth Crusade, which came in and basically held Constantinople. Not everybody knows this, but Constantinople was actually held for 70 years by the Crusaders, and that played a role in weakening the empire. Did it not?
It was held for about 1204 until 1261, actually. In 1204, it was conquered. Again, it was some kind of a civil war dispute, and they let them in from the back door.
Someone always lets them in from the back door.
It's always
one of ours.
One of the co-emperors promised to pay, and the mercenaries, and they didn't, and then they sacked the city. It was just a pretense to sack it. It was all planned all along to sack Constantinople instead of going to the either Jerusalem or in Egypt, but. By 1453 was the beginning, and by 1461 the Empire of Trabzon fell. That was in northeast, what is northeast Turkey right now. And slowly more areas in the Peloponnese and Athens fell later on in the next couple of decades. So things they were strangled all along. Cities were all around Constantinople were being invaded. But as you said, yes, the Franks that came, the Crusaders, as we call them, Franks, the various knights and people from Central Europe that came with goodwill in the beginning. The First Crusade was to get back the lands. Alexius Komnenos had requested aid to rescue some of the lands that from the Arabs back then in Levant, which is south of modern day Turkey, Syria, Palestine, Jordan. Those were Greek Byzantine lands.
That's where the current civil war is going on in Syria. Right.
So he had asked for help, and he got help, but then a lot of, if you get into the Crusades, a lot of things happened that spiraled out of control, and then so many people came for tax purposes. They would have their families wouldn't pay taxes for a long time, in perpetuity, if they went to this crusade. So the Second Crusade and the Third, there were just other ways to get people to go fight somewhere else instead of causing problems in Central Europe and have employment, I guess.
Right.
But to make a long story short, a lot of these crusaders stayed also in the Peloponnese, in a lot of areas in Greece. And even this family had married in, they became part of the Greek culture as well. The Duchess of Achaia, Duke of Athens, stuff like that. They have a medieval, exotic flair to them, but they're not just crusader stories, they're part of Greek history too. So that's another interesting part of the story.
Interesting. So basically, bottom line is, the Second Rome ends up falling.
Yes.
And here, at the same time, Muscovite Russia is starting. Russia already is starting to emerge from these threats, and there's a lot. There's still a lot of enemies facing. There's still remnants of the Tartars.
So the Mongols, as from what I've studied. They're the various sons of Genghis, and especially Genghis, who was the main guy. When he conquered China, which is the Mughal Empire, right? They actually were know Chinese civilization. I mean, they were similar to them, so they kind of absorbed it and took it over and uh, made it better. Maybe it was more organized, you know. But when it went westwards, the way they viewed other people was tax and subjugate and basically kill. You know, it was a different mentality for the Russians that the Mongols had as opposed to when it went to China. So
Interesting.
They burned, torched, raped, village. You know that. You know, but they were not that for the East though. Like under the Chinese, they kind of had they had them in know more, but they thought they could do a better job than the Chinese. You know. So
Interesting.
It's like the way we have Greeks had the wars with the Bulgarians and others, the Serbs sometimes. Like, yeah, we can do this better.
Right.
But this is just in the greater context in the world, you know.
I got you.
What happens.
Interesting.
But yeah, but for the Russians, they occupied, and it was a dark time.
Yes, it was definitely a difficult time to be around. You know, there's still wars going on today, so people haven't solved that problem.
But with Sophia now.
Yes, Sophia Paleologina, or Paleolog as we call her in Russian.
Paleologina. Their family is one of the main aristocratic families. Obviously, she was the niece of the last emperor, and they were legitimate heirs of now Constantinople of the empire. So they went to Italy, who along with other notable people like Anna Notaras, who had gone to Venice, they sparked the Renaissance because they carried a lot of the educational tools, scrolls, all the stuff from the classics that they brought to Italy and then to Europe with them. So did Sophia's family as well.
That's a very interesting point, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's something that I learned when I was taking Byzantine studies classes, that actually Byzantium was really the seed of the Renaissance.
Yes.
And that's something that you don't hear everywhere.
And although the Paleolog dynasty, the last dynasty, lasted 200 years, was the smallest, it was also another golden age in the philosophy, the reawakening of Hellenism, and also of theology. It was very spiritual. And even if it hadn't fallen, it continued a Renaissance, which just carried over to Europe at this time. And Sophia, although they were not well-to-do because they were refugees at this point, they were taken over by the Pope.
They had no independent control. For their lives, they had to basically because they were right. They had to depend on somebody else.
They had to flee with her brothers Manuel and I'm sorry.
Isn't that nice that you have the internet? You can just check.
We do. We gotta check. You know, we have little brain freezes.
It's all good. When you have cameras on you.
Yeah, it's Andreas and Manuel were her brothers. Okay, so they had Manuel took over the role of the legitimate role of emperor. It was a higher, but he didn't really want it. Her brothers were a little different than Zoe, and they were also told that by the Pope, "We're going to give you money to survive. You know, you have your your allowance for the month." They were protected under Cardinal Bessarion. He was a scientist and a philosopher. He was an Orthodox that became a Catholic, also a cardinal, and he was very influential in Italy. And he protected them, but they had to also convert to Roman Catholicism. That was one of the rules, and they tried to use
Roman Catholicism or Eastern Rite Catholicism.
No, Roman Catholic.
Okay,
yeah.
So this was like the real deal.
The real deal. So in a way, they wanted to use Sophia. Now her name becomes Sophia. She gets rebaptized.
Yes, we'll get into that in a second.
As a tool to be able to marry her and the Byzantine imperial family into some other European nobility that they could also use to tie them into the Vatican. You know. So Sophia, she had another great role, just like Anna, and speak a little bit more.
Yeah, well, here's what's interesting is that there's actually a Russian TV series right now. Well, it was done last year. It was called Sophia Paleolog, and it was pretty well done. I mean, I only saw the first episode and a half, so I can't say how well done the whole thing was, but it was very interesting because it talked about the initial distrust. The first part talks about the initial distrust that some people in Ivan's court had toward the new princes to be, because they were concerned that this was a plot by the Pope to Catholicize Russia. And I told people in my little preview video, is like the man behind me I'll tell you why he's angry. And that was actually the Metropolitan of Moscow from that TV series, who had a very angry look on his face, and that he was angry because he felt that this was, this was a plot. And basically, you see what happens where Ivan III requires that his bride-to-be becomes baptized as Sophia. So she comes as Zoe, and he has her baptized as Sophia, and that's how he says, okay, now I can trust that you're really Orthodox. Although in the Orthodox Church, if you're baptized, you're baptized. You don't get rebaptized. Yeah. That's not,
So Sophia never actually converted. She was always Orthodox. She was very Greek. The minute she, when the deal was made that the best suitor for her would be Ivan III. There were many other Italian also lords, but it didn't work out, and eventually this game of chess, I guess you call it. They figure out Ivan would be the best to tie them up with Constantinople, but via the Vatican now. So the minute she left and she went to Russia, she threw off her cape. She sworn off Catholicism and went back to her religion and continued the legacy of Constantinople into Third Rome, into Moscow.
This is what's interesting, because what happens is that this is where our symbolism of the double-headed eagle comes from, because before that we didn't have anything like that, and then adopting the idea of a third Rome, and then of course also the change of the imperial title from Great Prince to Tsar, which is Caesar. That's the actual direct translation of Tsar. It's Caesar. And Caesar comes from
Kesaras, Tsaros. That's where it comes from.
Right, and that comes from the Western. I mean, that comes from the Roman tradition, right? And again, the Eastern Roman Empire, which was Constantinople, that's the direct descendants right there. So, and then there was the famous quote that was like, "Moscow is now the third Rome, and there will never be a fourth."
Yes.
So that was kind of the legacy continued, and that's basically what triggers this. Well, again, it was there before with Vladimir, but that's what solidifies the idea of Russia having specifically a Byzantine direction, because there were also ties with the West, there were ties with the East as well, with obviously the Mongol invasion and so on and so forth. And Russian civilization clearly chose not to be with the East or with the West, but with the Second Rome. That was basically what Russia's legacy, that's where it roots from and continues. Of course, then you have the Romanov dynasty and so on and so forth, and things then get even more complicated in the 20th century. But that basically forms the core of Russian civilization, this Byzantine identity.
It's the first 500 years of Russian history which coincide with our Macedonian dynasties and then the later dynasties up to the Paleologos, which are what binds our worlds together and forms this idea of the double-headed eagle, looking east and west, being Christian and being also Greco-Roman.
An interesting point, the double-headed eagle, as you know, the Byzantine eagle has the wings down like this.
Yes.
And the Russian one, I'm not sure about the other ones, but the Russian one has it spread like this. Initially, ours was like this as well, but then it becomes like this. And what I heard was that one of the Tsars said that I don't want the eagle to have like these sad wings that go down like that. I want them to be fluttering like that. And you, I remember, told me another interesting interpretation.
From what I know, and you're right, in the beginning it was down, because at the original eagle is the empire, it's down, and everybody else sprung up, flew away.
That's right, they flew away. So I remember they flew away from the nest of the Second Rome. So I think I think
that's it. There's so much always to talk about these topics.
Yes.
We'll catch up on this topic some other time. We have so many interesting things to discuss every week with you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We'll put some links up for Sophia and Ivan, and for Porphyra, the Grecian rock opera, and Vladimir, the love that rocked the world. And catch us next week. Probably, I think, Monday, we said?
Yeah, I think we'll do it at the beginning of next week. That's right.
Yeah, we'll post the times. Thank you so much,
everybody. Thank you.
I'm Billy. This is George. Have a good night.